You're good.
Okay, let's get back into the infield because we are digging the series of reports filed by our photojournalist, Marty Pearl.
His stories have been great
Yeah.
so far. All right, let's go to him.
It's been 20 years now since I first started covering the Kentucky Derby as a journalist, and back then the infield was a very different place. It was still largely defined by random raunchiness and occasional acts of violence. In fact, two of the things commonly on display were women flashing the crowd Mardi Gras style and drunken delinquents picking fights with one another. So it was by no surprise that the countercultural magazine I worked for back then requested photos of, quote, and fights.
There was no shortage of material on display back then, but eventually the rise of cell phone cameras and the birth of viral photos would have a calming effect on infielders. After all, a good time should never result in assault charges or loss of employment. Dial it back even further to the 100th Kentucky Derby in 1974, and the random acts of nudity were not only more abundant, but also a national trend as the art of streaking took hold of pop culture, challenging the status quo. Or in the case of Derby 100 infielder Nace Huber, it was an intoxicated act of teenage rebellion combined with a desire for a better view. Or as he simply describes it now, 50 years later,
I was the fool that streaked up the flagpole there in the infield.
that single act of rebellion would not only propel Huber into Kentucky Derby history books, but also make him a legend amongst friends. He remained anonymous through the years, but agreed to finally out himself in honor of the 150th Kentucky Derby, and of course under the assumption that the statute of limitations had long expired for pole streaking or mooning. I asked him what the infield was like back in 1974, to which he poetically replied,
A lot of cutoffs and tank tops, and a lot of mud, blood, and beer.
I caught up with Huber at the Kentucky Derby Museum, where staff had provided several photos of pole climbers from that day. Huber is certain that this photo is of him. His initial motivation was just to get a better view of the big race, but about halfway up the pole, the crowd started encouraging him to do more.
Everybody was screaming, "Moon the crowd, moon the crowd, moon the crowd." So, you know, it's not easy to pull your pants down when you're hanging on a flagpole. So I pulled my pants down. That got a huge roar. It was so loud it almost knocked me off the pole. I couldn't believe how loud. Everybody there were just
Huber's mooning may have gotten the attention of the crowd, but local law enforcement was suddenly dialed in too, angrily awaiting his descent. Now his adrenaline was focused on an escape. He described those final moments on the flagpole like this.
The pigs, as they were called, okay, had their billy clubs and they were beating on that thing and they were saying, "Come down here, you hippie mother." You know, there was no way I was going to come down. So I just jumped out into the crowd, dove really, and I landed on some poor woman that was sitting in a lawn chair, rolled back, and I just took off through the crowd. Got away somehow, you know.
Delightful. Just another fond memory for an infielder that's become an enduring story. People have often asked me if I ever had a chance to actually enjoy myself out here while covering the infield, partake in the vibe, if you will. I'll let you in on a little story. Early in my career, I accidentally ingested some psychedelic mushrooms upon arrival. Ran into some friends, they offered me some chocolate. I thought, hey, I could use the boost in energy, right? Should have been suspicious by the fact that they were wrapped in tin foil and possibly smuggled into the track, but I just wanted that energy, so I gobbled that chocolate up, only to then be told, mushrooms. Well, it's too late then, had to just take the ride, right? Well, I wandered around for hours after that in a full-blown trip, taking pictures of things that only existed within my mind. But here I am, 20 years later, telling you about it, and that's what the infield's all about. Stories that last forever. Marty Pearl, Wave News.
I need more Marty Pearl throughout
What?
the day. That was amazing.
This might be the greatest misallocation of resources in
I
journalism
know.
history.
Why
What are we
have-
doing?
what are
That
we
is
doing?
fantastic.
I hope management is taking some notes today
I do
because
too.
Marty Pearl needs to be in every newscast moving forward.
Let's rewind the tape a little bit. He accidentally ingested
some
psychedelic mushrooms. Yeah, and then rewind it all the way back to the guy who did the story on, who described for us. I never thought about this. It probably is hard to pull your pants down and moon a crowd while you're climbing a flagpole.
Well, there's a couple around here.
Should we give it a shot?
Should give it a
We'll
shot.
give it a shot.
Yeah.
All right, Marty Pearl with his excellent infield trilogy.
That was amazing.
All right, we're going to have more coverage here. I don't know if it's going to be that good.
Yeah.
But this is cutting-edge journalism I hope you're appreciating we have here on Wave, the Derby
Absolutely.
station. And we'll have more in a minute.